Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Modern Lending Podcast Live. I'm your host, Alec Hansen. Today, we're going to be talking about lead management. And those of you that have seen that and tuned in know that in the past, I poked a little fun at lead management, called it not very sexy as a topic, called it some names. And during that process, I attracted the attention of our guest today. And we'll get into that story in a little bit. But Scott Payne, who's joining us today, is the CEO and founder of SDP Solutions. Almost 2 years old now, looks like, in the company, Scott. And this guy has a long history in mortgage banking. We'll talk about it from direct to consumer to retail, direct to consumer. But this guy has decided to go all in and focus on lead management. He supports companies across the country in upping their game. And I've said this before, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. The future success of any mortgage originator, in-market originator, is going to be predicated on their ability to successfully manage leads, period. So let's talk about this non-sexy, sexy topic with the one and only Scott Payne. Let's go. All right, Scott, welcome, brother. Good to have you here, man.
Hey, Alec, how you doing? Thanks for having me on. So excited to be on the show.
Dude, first and foremost, thank you, because this is going to be fun. And we're going to talk about the story about how I triggered you in lead management. But for those who are popping on right now, please, this is the fun part about making this live. It can be interactive. If you're a loan professional, man, you need this skill set. You need a lead management skill set. And we're going to talk about that today. So, Scott, how did we get introduced? How did we meet each other? What's the story?
Yeah, so 100 and 100 videos. Like, oh my gosh, by the way, that is amazing. And, you know, as busy as we are, it's just fascinating to me that you did that. So I probably got introduced to it. I was probably around maybe episode 20, 25. It started to get into my feed a little bit. So I started, what is this 100 and 100? Sure enough, started watching every day. And then sure enough, one morning I get up and go on LinkedIn and episode 32, lead management, there's on the thing. And I'm thinking, oh, this is awesome. Yes. Finally, somebody is going to, preach about lead management, right? And here we are, and the first words out of your mouth were lead management. It's the least sexy thing to talk about. And in fact, it's boring. And I was like, whoa, hang on. It was like, someone called my kid ugly.
Yeah.
Right. And so, ultimately, but again, you walked through it. You went through how, what you just said, right? It's going to be the critical to the future. And I've gone all in on it, right? As you mentioned, I'm a lead management specialist. I really help organizations. I've seen it over and over again where companies just struggle with, bringing a lead in, how they follow up, how what's consistency, all of that stuff. It's missed all across the board, and that's what I'm here to solve.
Well, so I want to get tactical on this with you, and I want to help. Normally on the goal of my podcast is really to add tactical value to an originator. Like, I want people to listen to this. I want them to get entertained. I want them to have fun, but I want them to walk away with something that they can implement that triggers them. They think differently, that moves them in another direction. Mm-hmm. And you're the perfect guy to talk about lead management as we've been going through my series, because in the beginning of the year, if you guys have missed it, I did a 4-part series on branding. I did a 4-part series on digital marketing. We did a series on local marketing, and all that stuff is designed to generate leads. And so it's only natural that we have to go to the next evolution. And so for those of you that are older school, like me, we lived in a world where lead management wasn't a muscular skill set we needed, right? I mean, Scott, you played the game. We didn't. Our realtor partners manage leads. It was like, hey, give them to me when they're in escrow. I don't want to talk to them. I mean, if they're not serious as a buyer, I don't want to talk to them.
Right. Call in the lefty is what you'd said. Yeah.
Just bring when you're ready. When it's time to close.
Right.
But now, man, our realtor partners, many of them have become lead aggregation machines. And we can talk about if that's healthy or not. But I mean, they're buying Zillow by the bucket full. They're having dialers in the Philippines call these people. And loan officers are like, I don't have that skill set. I can't help. So what for you was the triggering moment where you're like, you know what? I want to go on lead management. You've had a long career in the business. What turned you this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to talk about my history a little bit because for people to understand, right? Because end of the day, when I go talk to loan officers and train and talk about these things, it's important for them to know I've been in their shoes. So I started my career as a consumer direct LO for Syntex Home Equity, then became Nation Star, now Mr. Cooper. I started my career there. And fast forward about a year or so, I had an opportunity to go to Austin, Texas with my girlfriend who became my wife. And moved to Austin because she was a branch manager for another mortgage company.
Got it.
We were in the same business together, right? So I went from consumer direct to retail, and what I found was I took a lot of those same best practices I was doing in consumer direct. For example, I always knew the conversion rate of my lead sources when I was in consumer direct. I was in a special lead source. We had different filters we needed to track, etc.
Yep.
I was so honed in on lead sources. And so when I go to retail, and the retail environment at the time, we were mainly working with banks and working with bank referrals. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, how do I know how these convert? What bank should I go get and spend most of my time with? And so I took the same principles with me down to retail, where every lead I got, I was tracking conversion rates, all of the different KPIs along the way. And I knew at any given moment who my top realtor or top bank was.
Yep.
And I knew which banks were sending me stuff maybe too early in the funnel, right?
Uh-huh.
So I'll talk more about this maybe later, but ultimately, I spent about 8 months or so in retail and went back to consumer direct. And so coming back into consumer direct after spending time in retail, you learn even more, and you learn it's a hard work. We're fed leads all day in consumer direct. When you're actually out there hustling, it's much different. So I learned a lot. Fast forward a couple of years, I ended up being kind of promoted into, or I ran a consumer direct call center or team for about 1.5 years, and then moved into a marketing role. And in the marketing role, I was the sales liaison between sales and marketing, essentially.
Yep.
When sales had an issue with marketing, guess who they came to? They came to me. And marketing had issues with sales, which happen all the time, they came to me. And I was that middleman between the two, and I was in charge of lead distribution. I was always doing the right thing for the company. So that kind of led me into my lead management world. I implemented Velocify at NationStar in 2011, ran the whole implementation, rolled it out to 1,000 loan officers, 5 different divisions, including retail, and had so much fun with it in Velocify and lead management stuff that I ended up going to work for Velocify for 4 years. And I was an enterprise account manager, helped the biggest clients that using Velocify and really understanding how to use the system, what are the best strategies. And then I realized, there's really a need for this, where there's so many companies that need help. They need day-to-day help with, how do I run my sales teams? How do I manage our leads? What are the best practices? And, we'll talk a little bit more. It's not just leads anymore, right?
Yes.
It's called lead management and how you manage leads, but it's also referral management also is kind of combined in that. There's also now loan management. I'm working with a lot of companies now where we also help with things before, loans that are in the kind of pre-funnel LOS, pre-quals, and this kind of stuff. They're not converted yet. This is our wheelhouse. The same best practices, how you call, how you follow up, how you SMS, all of that stuff plays in.
Well, so let's get tactical, because let's just start there and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
And I'll frame it up for people so this is very specific to Loan Depot, but everybody has their own CRM, so to speak. So we operate on a custom built integrated Salesforce version inside our CRM that integrates with Mello, our tech platform, all that stuff. And so Salesforce, like a lot of CRMs, is robust. Lots of fields, lots of lead tracking tools, campaigns, workflows, and the normal in-market loan officer just stares at it.
Right.
It's overwhelming. And let's just take like navigating tech out for a minute. We're busy. We got a lot going on.
Yeah. And
so for somebody who doesn't have a lead management strategy, they've been winging it, or they're using, God bless them, their sticky notes or Excel spreadsheets still. By the way, if someone just heard this, I am talking about you. Like that's so true, man. They're like, I use the sticky note method. I'm like, oh dear God, that is not going to help you through. So how do you start 101 on this? Like, I need a plan. What should I be doing, Scott? What should I be thinking?
Really what I started, I have companies that I work with that have 3,000 loan officers. I have companies that I work with that have 2 or 3 loan officers, retail type loan officers, right? So, but what I find is it's consistent across the board. You have to have a game plan each and every day, right? Now, the game plan is obviously going to be different for everybody, right? So you got to come up with what that is. And by the way, little plug here. There's a game plan in here in this book, right? So there's a game plan. If you don't have one, you can start there. But really what you want to come up with is, a game plan around, put them in order, right? So you have your new leads. Typically that's the most important. You're going to, follow up with them over time. And you want to make, so many different phone calls, but you want to integrate also your emails and SMS that are automated and say the things you want them to say. We'll talk more about emails and how you can track and use that later on. But ultimately, really, you just want to come up with what you want your contact strategy to be for your customers. right?
That's so important. It's such a simple comment, Scott. Like, just what do you want to have happen to them?
Right.
So you get a lead, whether it's from a realtor, which is like a really hot, ready to go lead, or somebody at the grocery store is like, hey, can I get, some loan? Or you buy a lead off Lending Tree. You got to have a plan of like, what's my communication strategy? What's the frequency and cadence? Am I texting or emailing? What are those things that I'm going to say? So what do you think is this? What's a good example of a decent workflow or a lead flow here?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends where it comes from, right? And where it's at. So what I like to do is really start with, when you get a record, you get a lead, just call it. Call the customer. They expect a phone call. I see nowadays a lot of loan officers will say, I really don't want to make a call. I have this tool to send an SMS. I'll just shoot them a text.
Sure.
It's not enough. What I like to do is call them and try to get them on a phone. Okay. That's the key. And when you do that, you want to be able to take some type of survey or inventory on their situation. You're going to ask things like, what is your, what's your time frame to buy? What is your current situation to sell? You need to go ahead and start documenting that. And that, once you have that, will drive your kind of next follow-up workflows.
It's so funny. I love how simple this starts. Just call your lead.
Right.
It's super simple. Call your lead. And then from there, though, it can get complicated. Like, they don't answer. So sure. What's your voicemail? Yep. What's your plan after the voicemail if they don't call you back? But you, as the originator, just spending a few minutes whiteboarding this, documenting it, and creating a systemized plan is what you're saying is the start here, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, and the way I do it sometimes really is just on a piece of paper or a whiteboard, draw a timeline. Okay. Mm-hmm. And imagine that the customer is never going to answer the phone. And right on there, day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way across the whiteboard, and map out where you'd want these calls to go. If you were the customer, what would you expect? Right. And this might be for one lead source, right? If it comes from a realtor, I might do this. If it went to my landing page, I might do this. Those could be different scenarios, right? I might want to be more aggressive on one of those versus other. It could be, this came from my best realtor. Maybe that's a different call strategy than someone who's maybe an up and coming realtor for me. So there's all these different ways, but I would always start with that whiteboarding session of what do we want it to look like?
By the way, I made a note. I'm drawing, doodling as you're talking. I love this. Make a timeline of if they never answer.
Yeah.
Because then simplistically in my stupid brain, as soon as they answer, I get to go to the next timeline of they answered.
Exactly.
And from there and there and there. And all of a sudden, you spend 20, 30 minutes on this, Scott. I can imagine every originator out there could easily have a plan. And that's that's the starting base right there.
No doubt. And really where this, I'll fast forward a little bit. I was going to mention this later in the conversation, but this actually came about because back when I was running the lead management platform for NationStar, I was losing sleep at night, not knowing if my originators were following the right way that I had outlined when calls should be made, right? Yeah. And so what I ended up doing was secret shopping myself.
Oh, so good, dude.
So I would put a lead in, and this was very, this is 2012. I didn't have much technology to do this, but I would just put in my cell phone number and try to trick them. No one knew my cell phone number at the time. And I would put it in, look like a customer, and I would track every phone call, email, and text, maybe not text then, but email that I'd got. And to be able to show my sales leadership team what our sales teams were doing, I put it on the timeline.
Yep.
I put a lead in, I got a call here and an email here. Fast forward to now, 2021, SDP Solutions, my company, we have a division where I do about 400 of these a year.
Yep.
And you work with software providers, lead providers, mortgage companies that are my clients. And typically, anytime I'm doing an assessment of their current situation, guess what I do? I put a lead on their website or their contact me form, and I'm tracking every phone call and email I get for 10 days. I don't even answer the phone, right? Here's what you're currently doing. Then, even better, I call back.
Because I'm like triggered right now, because if you're a branch manager at Loan Depot and we give a lot of leads out to our loan officers, how are you kind of watching the path? How are you making sure that the path that you set out is being followed? Yeah. And if you're a loan officer and you're on a team and you got juniors and all this stuff and you're handing out leads, how do you make sure they're doing what you've mapped out? I love secret shopping. That's so great.
Inspect what you expect. I think the other key part of this is, because you mentioned it, once you make contact, what happens next? It moves down to the next workflow. You need to have a workflow for that as well. And here's why. We have done this now almost, I have to go back and look at the numbers. Let's call it 1,000 times because it's pretty close to 1,000 of these secret shops that we've done. And I don't call it a secret shop, by the way. It's a lead experience screening. It sounds much better than a secret shop.
Lead experience screening.
Lead experience screening. Yep.
Very, very good.
And so what I know, though, from doing almost 1,000 of these is we also, after 10 days of not answering the phone, we actually call back to the mortgage professional using a spoofed phone number. So this has evolved. I have 75 phone numbers. I have about 80 email addresses for these fake names and numbers, and I have a whole phone system that facilitates all of this. We're able to call back to the loan officer, spoof the number. We have a brief conversation. We're interested. It's a great, juicy deal, low LTV, blah, blah, blah. And we say, hey, can you call us back tomorrow? Actually, my kid's yelling in the background. I got to take him to soccer. Can you call me back tomorrow? And then we track what happens. Guess what? 80% of the time, I get a call back more than an hour late. Okay. Another
shameful.
Sorry, I even missed the first part. 50% of the time, I don't get a call back at all. And when I do get a call back, 80% of the time it's late. Okay. And then the follow-up that happens after that, we track for another 10 days. How are they following up with a contacted lead? This is better than a uncontacted lead.
Yeah. It's
someone's interested.
Oh my gosh.
And it's so much stuff that falls on the ground. And again, this is all the kind of the whiteboard. What do you expect? What do you expect to happen? And so what would you want to happen after that contacted lead?
Well, and this is where my brain goes to. Like what you're doing in this process of having an intentional workflow is you're getting down to a disposition.
Yep.
And right. So like you're trying to get them to apply or to see if it's a loan and and that's what every contact effort is driven to do.
Right.
You give them the phone and then you try to get them to take an app and you're going to have fallout. You're going to have the person that didn't take the app. They were interested, but they didn't want to do the app. You're going to have people that did the app, but didn't want their credit pulled. And then, so, right. You're going to have these buckets.
Yep.
And over time, especially as you scale up your business, you're going to have all these buckets and you can go back to these buckets. I mean, one of the best leads sources at Loan Depot right now are the aged leads, because all you do, I mean, literally all we're doing, and this is very simplistic, but coaching loan officers, just send them this video text and we give them a script.
Mm-hmm.
The script basically is, did you get everything you need type of a thing?
Yep.
You were interested a while ago. We didn't work with us. Did you get everything you need? I'm local if you need anything. And oh my God, dude, people are like, I jumped out of the process. I got overwhelmed. I was feeling
overwhelmed. Yeah.
And the other ones just say yes, and that's it. But like, if you're not following a lead management workflow like Scott's describing, like there's gold that you're leaving on the table.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned SMS. Emails, probably gone away a little bit from, now the SMS is picked up, but there's so much value still in having an email because you can track an open and a click. And when you can track those two things, when you think about your customers who aren't going to do anything for 6 to 12 months, when it comes time to follow up with those customers, the first person I would want to call is someone who has been reading every one of my emails I've been sending. They're engaged with my content.
Yes.
Those are the ones I want to focus on versus someone who's not reading or engaged with anything that I've been sending them or down the path. So, there's a whole kind of a scoring component that goes into this where you need to be
scoring
multiple things. And then scoring them appropriately when it comes time to follow up. If you end up with 100 leads that are in this, funnel that's a little further down the line, you want to be focused on the right ones at the right time.
So let's talk about lead scoring. Actually, you know what? I want to do something different. I want to do something with you right now and like as an actual takeaway for somebody. And then I'll talk about lead scoring. Let's you and I create the never answer plan here.
Okay.
Okay, let's just so I'm going to use your brain because you have way more, skills. Let's start with, you call and they don't answer. What kind of a voicemail are you leaving?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great part for an introduction. Well, let me say this. How many calls would you want to do on day one? Because there's certain lead sources you might want to call and say, hey, it's an hour later, maybe call again. Again, this is getting a little aggressive, right? But it depends, because if you are going to make 2 calls on day one, you might, leave the voicemail on the second call. Okay. And here's why. A little trick I've learned over time.
This is good. I'm just taking notes. Keep going.
Same thing with an SMS, right?
Yep.
Let's just use a lending tree lead where there's multiple people calling, right?
Example.
So lead comes in, I call them first and, I send an SMS, or maybe at that point, I'm not saying anything. but everyone else is sending an SMS and email. Okay. What I've learned over time is that you actually want to be the last person to send them an SMS on day one, because they're so overwhelmed with their phone ringing. When they get to their SMS, it is going to be, it goes from newest to oldest, and now you're on top. So maybe you sent one earlier, but make sure you're one of the last of the day to send it. So when they go back to it, there's a chance you're going to be at the top of the list. And my favorite little tagline is, and I hope everyone doesn't start doing this, because then the clients are going to figure this out. But
the good news, Scott, is as many pearls that you will drop today, the execution is where loan officers fall off. So sure. I never stress it.
I got you. So what I would like to say is, are you tired of the calls yet?
Yes.
Tagline. I'll make it easy for you. Click here.
That's so dope.
So, just something I've learned over time, that being on top in the phone when I look at my, iPhone is important. And there's different ways to do that. So on day one, it's a little different. That's why I asked about the voicemail. And you could use the same concept with, hey, I know you're getting lots of calls here today. Let me help you this.
Yep.
So yeah, I think at least a phone call on day one. Again, the phone call purpose is to gather intel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay. So they don't answer.
Yep.
You float them the text at the end of the day, maybe at the top of the list. When do you follow back?
So at that point, typical kind of processes, you're going to follow up again on day 2, and you might follow up on day 3, but I usually like to move that to day 4, day 5, give them a time to rest. Again, all dependent on lead source, right?
Well, and yeah, I mean, look, you could get very specific on a plan you'd have for every lead, but let's just stay generic and go through it.
Okay. So day 1, day 2, and then a day 3 to 5, let's call it, based on the lead source. A referral, maybe not as much. Again, another bought lead, maybe a little more aggressive. Okay. After day 5, here's a little trick that I've also learned, is that if you, I call it inquiry time of day, is a strategy that I use, right? The idea is that there are data points on the lead record that will give you a good indication as to when they might be available to talk on the phone. So if let's say a customer goes online at noon, that might be their lunch break. What I find is loan officers it's in my queue. I call it first thing, 8 o'clock in the morning, move on to the next thing. They're not using that data point to know that the lead came in at noon. I should try to call them around noon. And by the way, I don't even call them at noon. I actually call them, and I structured this for all my clients, where when we use that day and time, we're now trying to use 30 minutes ahead of when the lead actually came through, because a customer doesn't just go online typically and hit submit. Just type in their name and submit.
Smart.
Doing some research, looking around. They're online a little bit before. Call them around that time of day.
Okay.
So I like that little nugget there. I think that's a good one to and it may not be that. It could also, think about this too. It could be if you're calling former customers.
Yeah.
Go back and look at your notes. When did you have your conversations with them previously? What time of day was that? Log that somewhere. Use that in your strategy as well.
Well, let's talk about notes for a second, because obviously in my mind, they're crucial. And I guarantee it, because I'm a loan officer at heart, that a lot of in-market retail pros are not documenting their conversations, the lead, the voicemails they're leaving, what type of voicemails they're leaving. And, it just sounds like it's so important, Scott. It sounds like it's just like blocking and tackling. Like, if you don't do this, you can't play.
Really, yeah. And you mentioned it on one of your other podcasts around a remember this field, some type of remember this. You need to remember this about the client. You're having conversations with these customers. You need to be documenting what are their favorite teams, the kids' names, pets' names. All of this stuff should be documented and always used, not just on this transaction, but if you're going to be the loan officer for life, used 15 years from now. How is Johnny doing now? Is he in college yet?
Dude, seriously.
Those types of things.
Yeah. And I know that sounds, for some people, it could be like manipulative, right? You're like writing down their secrets so that you could bring it up next time and you don't really care. Yeah. And I would definitely argue that it's the opposite. Yeah. If you take the time to ask these questions and document it, you're showing that you do care, that you are wanting to remember it, and that it's hard to remember things when you have 700 customers, and that you gotta document it or you won't. And it's just so crucial. So thanks for hitting that on the head. Let me go back here. So after day 5, this has been 1, 2, 3, 4 touches, 4 to 5 touches. Still no. When do you move on?
Again, depending on lead source, but I like to let the lead sit, no matter the lead source, right? Because if it was a bot lead, and everyone else is calling them. It could have been a referral that just wasn't ready. A lot of times they're not ready right now. You need to be having touch points 30, 60, 90 days, all kind of built in, all based on kind of where they got into the process. Those who were pre-qualified, maybe you would call more than someone who was uncontacted, right? Or more aggressively.
This is what I want everyone to hear, Scott. Like, even in this simple, they never answer, never respond, like line. Like, I want everyone to I want to paint this picture. So you get the lead, you call it, they don't answer, you leave your voicemail, you send them a text at the end of the day, they don't respond. Day 2, you have another call or voicemail or text that you're going to do with another script. Day 3, then you give it a little cooling off. Day 4, day 5, then you have a 30, 60, 90 tickler that maybe it's an email, maybe it's a text, but the power, you don't have to remember any of this as a loan officer, because inside your CRM, I don't care which one, I know they all do this. You can have that lead pulled up. You can ask for a reminder on the next day, a task.
Yep.
And then you come in the next day and all your tasks are dialed. It's all right there in front of you, and you just bang it out while you're having your coffee. And so, you build it and then it runs for you. Right.
Well, I think, part of that whiteboarding strategy too is you should be figuring out at what points do you want the automated stuff to pick up as well.
That's right. We haven't even talked about automation, where a text can be queued to go out, or a video or whatever.
Right. A lot of times loan officers I work with, I'm sitting with them. A lot of the times, pre-COVID, I would be on site with clients. And one of my best practices from a consulting standpoint is to sit with the end user and watch them and go back to my days as a loan officer and see, how can I eliminate 9 clicks down to 2, all of this stuff. I'm sitting with them. And so ultimately, I'm just trying to drive the, how they're actually working the lead. What are the ways that they're, putting this information in? I mean, all of that stuff is kind of crucial to kind of know. And so again, if you have a team of people, let's just say, I would recommend you're also setting time aside in your, in a month to go sit with your people and understand, are they following the process? Any questions? What are the hiccups? All of that stuff. Mike Eshelman was actually a client of mine when I was at Velocify. And this is stuff me and him did together. I would go on site and we'd do this together. I mean, this is, you have to understand kind of what the loan officer's day is day in and day out, along with that process, and does it actually work?
And I want to do a call out to anybody in leadership right now hanging in on this conversation, because I did this whole funny, rant about Maslow's hierarchy of loans.
Mm-hmm.
And the first level of that is get your loan officers loans. Like, before you want to coach them into excellence, make sure they're eating.
Right.
And so you as a leader today, listening to Scott, should be inspired to go build a workflow, a lead flow for them in the system. Sit down with them, help them whiteboard out what they want to have happen. Work with CRM to get it organized so that the tasks come up for them and they don't have to build it and they're not overwhelmed. You want to feed them? There's nothing more transparently obvious to me than the reality, Scott, of what you've been saying, which is the momentum this type of strategy builds over time.
Yeah. No
One
doubt.
lead, fine. 500, 1,000 over a course of how many of a year, of 2 years of your career, and all of this data now at your fingertips is just a minefield for you to go back to any time.
Yep.
Imagine rates dropped, and obviously during COVID. Imagine if you'd spent the years before that having this robust CRM lead management, and you had all these people in your bucket. Yeah. One call could have turned it into hundreds of thousands of dollars for that originator.
No doubt. And, the prioritization of that, right? Because once you come up with the workflow, the whiteboard, now you got to put it into play as to, that all becomes prioritization. All of these things you come up with now need to compete against one another for what is the most important thing to do in a day.
So that's a perfect way back to lead scoring.
Yep.
You mentioned lead scoring, and we got to hit it. Explain that simplistically to me, the kindergartner, and then how you go about doing that.
I mean, so what I historically do with clients is I ask them to go back and run an analysis, just actually pull data from your funded loans. Let's start there. What are some of the attributes you do well? Maybe it's a product, maybe it's a certain loan size, or maybe it's a certain state, maybe it's a certain, zip code. If you're in a local area, maybe you crush it in one zip code versus others. Find out, get all of these attributes about your funded loans, and let's look back and then try to tell a story. What are we good at? Start with that. That's a good place to start. Once you have that, you can start to layer in. I'd say the number one thing we score on right now with my clients is that we're scoring emails and opens and clicks. If I can track their opens and clicks, that becomes just an easy place to start when it comes to scoring, right? A good example is if someone opens an email, let's say you're on the 5th attempt and they haven't answered their phone yet in that whole workflow we're on, day 30, but they just opened an email from me. Pick up the phone, call them right now.
Right then.
Right. And maybe you don't get them that time, but maybe that extends. Maybe you make 2 additional calls now that they've opened an email and now they're engaged. Otherwise, they would have fallen off after the 5th attempt. You need to kind of reprioritize that as well.
Well, Scott, you said something earlier, and I want to highlight again of lead scoring your referral partners and your lead sources.
Yeah.
Because talk about an effective business planning tool to look back over the year and be like, hey, Realtor Susie gave me 50 leads and 2 closed. And Lending Tree gave me 50 leads and 10 closed.
Yep.
And yet I'm spending money over here on co-marketing. And I mean, this is how you make decisions.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about lead management being so critical. I think that goes along with that is you must know the conversion rate of all of your sources.
Yes.
Including your referral partners. You have to know the conversion rate at all times. And I'm sorry, it's not just the conversion rate of a funded loan. Okay. It's also that first application conversion rate. Did they take an application? Because you're going to find over time, you get hooked up with a real estate agent, you build a relationship there, and they just like, oh yeah, I'm going to send this to Alex. And before you know it, they're just sending kind of everything to you with no filters and all of that. So that would be a key for me. If I knew that my application rate was really low on one particular realtor, I need to do some coaching. Here's what we do good. Here's what we don't. An example I used in Austin when I was a retail loan officer was every Thursday night before I left for the night, I would look and pull this report to show me all of my conversion rates for my banks. I had managed about 6 different banks in the Austin area. And I would look to see who had the highest conversion rate on applications over the past 2 weeks was number one, and also a funded one. And I would try to find which bank I wanted to go to on Friday morning to take donuts to. And I would walk and show up with the donuts, and I'd be like, hey, by the way, thank you for the business. I'm very appreciative.
Yep.
Here's some things I'm seeing. Make sure you understand kind of our products, right? And it was just a way to get in the door, but I was doing it very strategically based on my conversion rates for my people.
But that's the difference between that's what I mean when I talk about the future success of the loan officer is going to be on this skill set, because what you just said, Scott, is you weren't wasting time.
Right.
You were going right in there strategically like a sniper, having armed with data in order to have conversations that pushed your opportunities forward.
Yep.
And if you're a loan officer today and you don't have a system, you're operating organically, you never thought you needed one, I hope that your eyes are opening up and you're realizing there's a chink in your armor and there's a huge opportunity to maximize more business with some focus and some intentionality.
Here's another stat that I use that I think would be important with this as well, is that there is a book called The Myth of Multitasking by Dave Crenshaw. Okay. And what he talks about and what he studies here is that the effect that multitasking has on things. And so typically, right, I've heard and I've hired people before and I ask them what their strengths are. And, a lot of them will say, I'm a great multitasker, right? And that sounds great. Oh, wow, they can do multiple things at once. But what we learn over time and what's in this book is that he says that 40% of your time every day, okay, that's just one day, think about the entire year, is wasted between when you're switching tasks. Okay. So think about your prioritization of your leads.
Yep.
You need to have obviously a workflow and you need to have that, but which leads are important in that? You need to be able to jump very quickly from one lead to the next, to the next, to the next, and trust it and not have to think about what lead should I call next. I see too many times where a loan officer is spending time thinking, oh, when's the last time I called Joe? Oh, that was, 3 minutes here. Finish up. Oh, when's the last time I called Susie? Oh, that was, maybe I'll skip Susie. And they spend so much time wasted thinking about what to do next. 40% is a ton of time. So, how can you use that time better?
So I'm looking through all this and it looks like work, but once work's going, it looks like it's going to be supporting you.
Yep.
What are some pro tips or some I want to say hacks, but what are some things you notice that really move the needle in this kind of stuff if somebody's getting serious about this? Whether it's a phrase, a text you do, a specific follow-up strategy? What are some kind of little things that stand out for you?
One thing, I love quotes, and right above my computer here, I have a whiteboard of just quotes that I've heard over time. I want to say one of them is yours. Is big moves are just a series of small steps? Was that you?
No, but I love that deeply.
That's a great one. The other one I really like is consistent. Actually, I have this one somewhat memorized. Consistent and persistent effort over time, right? Think about that every day. Consistent and persistent effort over time is actually from Phil Treadwell on a podcast he did with Jimmy Ryan, who's also a client of mine. And anyways, that mindset every day when you come in, it's just consistency. It's all about doing the process you have set up and doing it every day and not getting away from it. Setting the times and block times per day. I see a lot of times where they're like from 12 to 2 every day, I call my leads. I'm like, well, what about that customer who works between 12 and 2 and they inquired at 5 p.m. because they don't have time to talk between 12 and 2? You've got to set blocks multiple times throughout the day. It's not just one little block and think that that's going to work every single time.
Yep.
But it's got to be consistent. And it may not be the same every day. Maybe it's, you alternate days on your outbound times. I think those is the one takeaway. It's really just build the process and trust the process and do it consistently every day. It'll work out. It's all a numbers game.
If you're a loan officer right now, I mean, how great would it be for you to walk in to the next day and immediately have a plan of attack built? Like because I know there's some loan officers, Scott, that walk in with I wonder what I'm going to do today.
Yeah.
Like a blank slate. I can do anything I want today. No plan, but I'm here and I'll do some emails in the morning.
Yep.
And I know people live their life like that. I'm like, but can you imagine walking in and having a series of hot calls to make and follow-ups to do right in front of you? And if that's overwhelming or like you feel like that's like, oh, that sounds gross. No, the opposite of that is it's amazing.
Right.
You got stuff to do.
Be focused. Yeah. I use a 1, 2, 3 method for just my business personally. My ones are the stuff that's most important. It's ordered 1 to 3, and I set it every night before I leave my desk. I used to have my team do this when I was a manager. Give me your 1, 2s, and 3s of your files. You're going to be working first thing in the morning.
Yep.
Right. And another little nugget too that I think ties into this really well. Dale Vermillion talked about how on my podcast, he had talked about how I've heard him tell the story many times at conferences, but how loan officers were not allowed to listen to their voicemails until like 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
You didn't want to come in and get derailed. You need to come in, focus on the most important things.
Do your business.
And then, then you can get into some of that other stuff. So I think that's an interesting one too.
What advice do you have for anybody that might be feeling overwhelmed by this, Scott? Just like, oh my God, this is the time of this, and I don't know, or I'm uncomfortable. Do you have any advice?
I mean, I think start simple, really.
Nice.
Yeah, don't overwhelm yourself with. You will get to some of these things we're talking about, and you'll learn over time what it is that fits your business. But start simple. Start very simply with my new leads are more important than leads I've called one time. Leads I've called one time are more important than leads I've called 2 times. And work your way down to as many phone calls as you want to make and start simple as that.
Yeah.
Right? Keep in mind too that, I talked a little bit about lead management isn't just leads anymore. It could be an abandoned application from your digital mortgage application system. It could be a loan that hasn't been locked yet and needs to. Those are still kind of like leads.
Yeah.
They need to be followed up and prioritized with. And I find a lot of companies will use their LOS to try to, as a prioritization of things. It doesn't work. So you can use the same strategies you have in your leads with your loans. And those would actually maybe be more important than leads, to be honest, right? You're trying to get them across the finish, into processing or whatever from that point. So, utilize those same strategies in different parts of your business.
Okay, let's go here for a little bit. Let's talk automation versus personalization, because it's easy to take a lead and put them on a monthly drip campaign where they're getting a generic email from the company with the header and your face at the bottom about economic news. So there's that's the ultimate non-personalized drippy once a month, not strategic, etc. But then on the other side, personalization requires time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got to actually call them. Like I'm busy maybe, or I got to, so how do you coach into that? When's automation okay? And I'll even give another example. I'm familiar with a company called Agent Legend.
Mm-hmm.
And, they set up these automatic workflows where a lead comes in and boom, a voicemail, an email, a text, all drop on this person, depending on when you want to set it up, type of a thing. But it's all instant, automated, non-personalized, because you can't record a video for every single person. So what's your take on automation? Where does it fit? What should I be careful of if I'm thinking about using it? Give us your insight.
Well, the first thing to start with too is that it's changed. Obviously, it's evolved. And what we used to say was that you never wanted to send an SMS to a customer you haven't made contact with yet. However, that's shifting over time, because now people are kind of expecting that. That's a way that they would prefer to communicate. And so, two things I would recommend. One is, if you're getting a referral from a real estate agent, I would be asking for those things like, do you think they're okay with an SMS? What is their, and go back to that survey type thing. What is their time frame for buying? If you have some of those survey questions, those can start to be used in your personalization. So something like, hey, if it's someone that's just kicking the tires, wants to get pre-approved, might be 12 months. It might be a different message you send to them after your first attempt than someone who is more warm. And so, how do you utilize those data points for those follow-ups? Could be something like, hey, I know that this is just something you're looking into. My name is, and put in your name, and, no hassle, no rush. Whenever you get a chance, feel free to check out this landing page, check out our services, or check out, things we do, with like Bill Gaylord, or is it Bill Gaylord? Yep. And the team, right? And what they do, right? And, it'd be a good point to kind of mention, hey, just here's what we do. And here's what we do in the community. I think it was is it GH community? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yep.
Nailed it.
So, check those things out. Also, I'll just throw it out, give Mr. Gaylord a shout out. Back when I was at the lead management system, I actually got an opportunity to go into that branch and learn about what they do.
Yeah.
From a lead management perspective, there are people in your organization, regardless of where you're at, who have had this mastered.
Yep.
Pick their brains. I'm sure they're willing to share with you.
Dude, absolutely. I love that comment, Scott, because you don't have to invent the wheel. It's done. Yep. Somebody already has done it. I mean, even you and I playing around with a plan earlier today, someone can take that and run with it. And I want to pick that up, what off you said, from somebody just starting. I love the concept of just start, like make a workflow and work it. And what'll happen is you'll tweak it. You'll want it to be a little better. You'll get into something else. You'll realize this script is working over this one, and you'll just slowly improve your style, but you can never do that if you don't start. Right. So you got to just kind of push the cart forward. Do you have any cool automation tools out there you like?
So one thing that I'm starting to use more and more in the consumer direct space, especially, right, is that typically, historically, consumer direct's not going to be on video. They're not going to be face-to-face. They're doing nationwide lending, right? So what has happened since COVID is that, teams of people that are in the consumer direct world are now on camera with their teams throughout the day. They're doing team meetings virtually. Or they have family members where they've done the Zoom calls where you get together and you play games and you talk and do all that stuff. People are getting used to talking in front of a camera. Consumer direct LOs are as well. And so one of the things that I found interesting and started to work with some clients on is integrating technology that allows them to talk to a customer face-to-face at a certain point in the conversation. In retail, that's a huge advantage. I knew when I was at NationStar that if I could get a lead into a retail loan officer and they could drive a face-to-face conversation, that was a 15% lift in our conversion rate. Okay. Every chance I had to do it, I was doing it. Every time. That was a lift. But now a consumer direct type LO or someone, maybe it's not someone that's in your local area that you're doing business with, whatever. If you can get on the phone, if you can get face-to-face with them, you'll have a better chance of converting that lead. Customers are more used to this now. And so, I'm leveraging things like, hey, let's schedule some time to follow up next. Okay, I'm going to send you my Calendly link. Yep. They take an action in the system. It fires a post that sends a text to the customer, and they go to their link and they click on the link and it pulls up the LO's calendar. Let's find a time that works for both of us. Yep. They go and schedule their time. They hit submit, and that sends it to the LO's Outlook, puts it on their calendar, sends an invite to the customer. And guess what's also attached to that? A Zoom meeting. Yep. So now, everyone's used to Zoom now. It's just it's just a buzzword, right? And so
I joke all the time, like, even if the customer doesn't want to get on video, set it up via Zoom because they'll see you.
They'll see me, and I'll be able to share my screen.
That's right.
Now I can show them and walk them through and do all these things through a tool like Zoom that a customer is already used to. And how that is leveraged with a lead management system. Again, it's done in different ways. It's really like, how do I get that link to them as fast as possible? I take an action or push a button that pushes that right to their phone.
Yep.
And we do it together. And what I found too is that over time, if you just send them a customer a link via email, not going to much success with them scheduling an appointment. But if you can say, hey, I know you're talking on your cell phone right now. I'm going to send you a text real quick. Can you real quick go to your text? There's a link. Click on. Let's schedule the time together.
Nice.
The customer shows up to those appointments more often when they picked the time themselves than if you just kind of said, hey, what's a good time to call back? And you call them back and they don't answer the phone.
By the way, we're hitting our limit here. But Scott, the funny thing where my mind's just dancing a million miles an hour is this type of a strategy is overlays on everything. I mean, recruiting. If you're a branch manager and you recruit talent to an organization, lead management, what's the flow? When do you call them? How often?
Oh my gosh.
Dude, it's this is the backbone. This is why, it's never as buzzy. I know this, triggers, everybody, you specifically, but when you talk about personal branding and digital marketing, LOs get excited.
Sure.
They're like, ooh, that sounds sexy. That sounds fun. And then you're like, okay, let's do a session on lead management for an hour. And they're like, oh God,
gross.
It's the engine. It's the engine of your entire machine. You could be the best freaking digital marketing branding master of the universe. But if you can't manage leads, all that goes off a cliff.
Wasted money, wasted time,
wasted money.
Yep.
Well, dude, I appreciate you showing up here today, Scott. You gave me ideas. It's been fun, man. Is there any final words you have for anybody who's digging into this today?
I would say too, a little plug here. I do have a podcast you see over my shoulder, Lead Management Masterminds. I have, industry experts come on and we talk about lead management strategies. So maybe you can come on and learn a couple things about maybe how to get started. And I don't know, maybe Alex, I can have you back on the show. We did episode 11 together. I had Alec on back during the COVID times, but maybe we do an updated episode about where to start. We just kind of dig into some of that stuff. So more to come. Check out the podcast. Look for me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Thanks for your time today, Scott. Appreciate you, brother.
You got it. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you guys for hanging with us on the Model Money Podcast, and we'll see you next time on the internet.